What's going on, everybody? Bobby Five with my guy, Brandon Cruz. We're going to be talking a little Thursday night football showdown. I'm already off to a nice start so far today with the baseball, so hopefully that can continue. And hopefully my Dodgers can get another win tonight. But we're going to be talking about maybe the ugliest single game slate we've had this year. Probably. I think it is. It's got to be the ugliest, right? Right, Brandon? I don't think there's been one this all over the place, right?
No, not to this degree where anybody is playable.
Yeah, it's really like that. And I'm curious to hear. I want you to start off. I'm going to share my screen, but I want to start off with your thoughts before I get into what I'm doing, because I have a very, 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 very strong take of a couple things. Well, one major thing today, but I'm curious to see what we're similar on and what we're not. So why don't you start with some overall thoughts, and then we'll get into talking about some specifics, captains, etc.
So I guess I have three thoughts, and I know for a fact I'll at least remember two of them during this discussion right here. So like one is that the fact that salary doesn't matter at all with the injuries, and I'm assuming, I mean, things haven't been confirmed, but I'm assuming that like Derek Carr is out as well as Taysom Hill, or at least we'll get that, 90 minutes before kickoff. So like salary doesn't matter at all. So we can play whoever we want. Or at least what I mean by that is the fact that the New Orleans side of this game, like you can very easily get Rattler, the number one, number two, or number three wide receiver, Bub, or even the other guys. And I guarantee you I'm not going to remember these guys' names. I'm just going to refer to them as wide receivers ones and twos for New Orleans. But the fact that like Bubs, like he'd be 6,000 in the captain, position. He's 4K in the flex. And he's wide receiver one, regardless of if he, scores you 9 points or 18 points, he's still wide receiver one at that price tag, et cetera, for the other positions on New Orleans. And at that point, like Kamara's pricing doesn't even matter. I think Kamara is optimal in this game. And I think he most likely works in the flex. And I'll kind of work back towards that in a second when I talk about captains. Secondly, is this, at least from what I'm seeing, there are like very distinct lineups that are going to carry like massive trains due to the fact that they can carry, 5 of like the top projected like 8 like DraftKings points positions in this slate. So once you identify that, which we'll talk about this, throughout this video, those are really leaning towards like Kamara captains with like Bo Nix, Rattler, Williams, and we can figure the rest of that out. And or Bub means captains to where it's like Bub means Kamara, Bo Nix, Rattler, and stuff. And the reason why these lines are so important is because they're where I'm looking at it. Those types of lineups are almost guaranteed to cash. Now, granted, when we look at a huge slate that has like or a contest rather that has like 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people, of course you're not going to have everybody playing those lineups, but that moves, in my opinion, the cash line to be a really difficult place to hit today. Because there's so many like by default like raw based lineups that should, whatever tool you're using, that should show you finishing in the top 15% of whatever contest you're playing in. And so you can either identify like kind of where those trains of lineups are going to fall in the cash line and understand that, hey, if I want to beat that, then I need to get like some really wild captain or like one-off plays and or leave a ton of salary on the table and accept that you're either going to fall, super high in the cash position of these contests, competing to take it down, or you're not even going to be close to cashing in a slate like this. I think that's the first, or at least the first two. Like I said, I know I had 3 points. I only remember those two, but that's where I'm at with this slate tonight.
Yeah, I hear you. First of all, I want to always say what I say on these types of slates. I don't think anybody should play cash in these things. I mean, I just can't get my head around what the cash like. I just would love,
Or when I say that, I'm looking at anywhere between like the top like 23 because I don't play cash either. Yeah, when I say that, I'm looking at like most contests are paying out between 23 and like 18% of the field. Sure. That's what I mean by that. When I say cash like that, that's what I'm referring to.
No, I appreciate you clarifying that one because I was thinking, that makes a lot of sense actually to me. I wanted to get a lot of different types of exposure today. As you can see, this is like what I put my settings on. I did make some changes after this build, but this is what I've got at, what I started with. I left. I made it impossible. I do have a couple of hand builds that I did get to 49.6 or so, but I'm intentionally leaving at least 1,500 on the table and as much as 15,000. I really think that's actually not a bad idea. I think there's a chance in a game like this that both defenses are the highest scoring players, the highest scoring of anybody. We saw. I mean, first of all, the last game when New Orleans played, the highest scoring defense of the year was that. I mean, Tampa Bay, what did they have? 30. It's going to be hard for any player to get 30 tonight. The Saints themselves scored a defensive touchdown last time. The Broncos, these guys, both these teams are going to be able to turn it over, and both these teams are. I like the defenses a lot, so I guess is what I'm saying. I specifically went out of my way to get exposure because I couldn't stop getting 100% Kamara in the captain, and I actually don't mind the take if you're going to leave a bunch on the table that maybe you do just lock in Kamara at captain. It's not what I'm doing, but I wouldn't mind that take. I wanted to spread out. And again, this is for the lottery. I did hand build another 6 lineups that are totally different. But I want to be overexposed to the Saints defense, even as a captain. They're projected to be 2% owned. Vele is my favorite other captain option for Denver. I actually have Vele as a captain on FanDuel. The way I'm trying to do it, though, is I want to go even more extreme with leaving money on the table. We saw it happen with McCaffrey the first week. Basically, the answer was if you just swapped out McCaffrey for Mason that week, you were good. Because you had to leave 10K on the table, and that's what everybody who won everything did. They basically just had the same lineups I did, except for they had that. I tried to rework things and do all that. Nope, not tonight. I am going with the cheapo. So this is the sort of the spread out exposure that I had for my captain ownership. In my hand builds, I have more of the Saints captain. I have that 2 out of my 5. I have Groupie in 1 of my 5 as the kicker. I have Bub Means, and I have what's my other one? Just because literally this could happen. I threw Will Lutz into my other one. I don't think this is going to be all that pretty of a game. I get it. Sean Payton back in New Orleans. I do like Rattler in general. I think he's actually I think he actually played way better than any of the numbers would show in that game against Tampa Bay, and he's willing to gun and go for it, which I kind of like. But both these defenses are high opportunistic defenses, and I want to be really overweight the defenses in general. As far as captains go, again, you're going to get. I think it's going to be closer to 50% on Kamara in the higher buy-ins, in the single entries and whatnot. So I wanted to be below that. I also wanted to. I don't see why we wouldn't play as much. And again, I don't have a huge amount. I guess I built 6 hand lineups because my other one was Jaleel McLaughlin. Why are we convinced that Javonte Williams is going to outscore Jaleel McLaughlin? I don't mind. You can leave the extra money on the. Yeah, he costs more. Javonte Williams. I'm not saying to save money, but there's no reason that Jaleel McLaughlin can't outscore Javonte Williams in this game. So I like the idea of actually playing more Jaleel McLaughlin. I have it more in the flex than I do in the captain. But those were sort of my other takes. But I like Vele as my favorite receiver from Denver. I've been talking this guy up this whole season, and he only played 2 games because he was hurt. But I actually wanted to play him on the main slate when he was 3K, and nobody knew his name. He's 2 games. He's put up 11.8 and 11.9, right? I think somewhere around there. I think that the Sutton ownership is going to be a little bit higher at captain, or maybe not captain, but overall than you're getting exposure on. And I personally think you just want to be overweight these sort of funky plays. There's no reason why it couldn't be Cedric Wilson or Troy Franklin. I think people are going to play the means the most, which I get. But I also think that spreading out and getting to some of those other guys, Mason Tipton is another one that I would be want to be a little bit over on. Again, he's in. I say I want to be over. I have him at 11% on this build. I actually have him like 22% now overall. Mm-hmm. But I am doing it without if I'm subbing, if I'm hand built where I was hand building, instead of subbing him out and trying to rebuild my lineup, I'm just like, nope, I'll leave that. I'll leave the difference between Cedric Wilson. I'm sorry, the difference between Mason Tipton and Bub Means. Just forget it. It's 2,400 cheaper. I'll just play Tipton over Means in a number of those. So I like the idea of spreading out. I think it is one to get a little bit wild with. So if let's just say, I know you're not playing 150 or whatever, but if you were, what percentage do you think you'd end up on, first of all, Kamara at captain, and then how are you treating the quarterbacks in the flex?
This is probably not a slate I would do either quarterback in the flex, because whenever I'm building lineups, I'm usually trying to work backwards, regardless of what sport it is, of who do I think is optimal or whoever we can identify first. I think Bo Nix and Rattler, based on one, their price, and two, like hell, if they both score like 11, I think it'll be enough for them to be optimal, regardless of how this game plays out. I mean, like worst case scenarios, this game ends up being like 9-3 or whatever. Right. Like them both at 11 is perfectly fine in a game like that. I think Kamara is optimal. So, if I was answering of like where I would go in terms of captains, I think Kamara is probably the favorite to be the optimal captain today, just because one, he's already, scoring the points that he's scoring, but like he's most likely going to be the main focus of this offense. And I like what you said about Tipton, because like, yeah, sure, Means is now the wide receiver 1, but yeah, I mean, these guys are both like normally like wide receiver 4s and 5s and stuff. Plus they're bringing up guys from the backup or the practice squad. Like there's no reason like Tipton is substantially worse than Means. Yet again, salary doesn't matter at all. Like you need to get that, or if you're looking at that, rather, just because one guy is 4K and one guy is 1,600, like that doesn't mean anything in this game. It's just based on whatever their positions are. And so yet again, when we're looking at least for me, that's why like if Kamara's optimal in the captain, and I'll get back to the percentage of captains in a second. Yeah. If Kamara's optimal in the captain, Nix and Rattler are most likely, more than likely being optimal. That means that, as I stated, finding those lineups that are going to score very well at a raw point per dollar or at a raw projection, leans like you can easily get Kamara, Nix, Rattler, whether you want Williams or Means. Like you just go to Tipton, and that's one of the more popular builds that's close to spending all of the salary cap, that leads or lends itself to being a pretty good chance of like cashing in most contests. And so et cetera, everything I already said about getting different. And so with all that stated, I would probably run, because I don't think there's that many like 1v1s you could do. If I was running Kamara, or if I was looking at like a 150 build, I would look at it of Nix and Rattler running or being optimal. So at that point, I'm just rotating 3 positions. I think I could get to the spots that I would want in like 40 to 50 of those lineups. And so like by default, I'd probably be somewhere in the range of like 27 to like 33% Kamara, which will probably be underweight on what his actual percentage of being optimal would be. But just because I think I could hit, all the outs or whatever in that sense. And then, when I'm looking at my portfolio from that point of view, I then have, like 70% to like throw, Means, Tipton, Williams, like whoever else, like just trying to hit, one-offs and stuff like that. Understand that I'll probably end up burning those lineups. And, for that reason, like I think this would be a pretty horrible, or maybe not horrible, slate to do like a lot of lineups in. I just think you're going to have like very diminishing returns on a good majority of the lineups. Like this is one where like your lineups will absolutely be spread out when the contest is over, because I think there'll be a lot of lineups just dead on arrival. And we don't even know that. Like there's a good chance like Means like might go out there, he gets targeted 8 times, but he drops 6 catches and he catches 2 for like 32 yards to like end the game. And like he's just dead on arrival, So I mean, answering your like captain percentage question, that's probably how I would look at it. And so like the only number I could like lean on would be like, that number that I gave for Kamara and like spreading stuff elsewhere, like the other 70%.
Yeah, I think that makes some sense. I have I didn't play more lineups or less than usual today. I've sort of been running a similar number, but I actually like these for running a lot of them, because I think you can make a lot of money by just forcing out literally it's even as much as people are going to talk about it on every show and it's just not going to happen. They're not going to build you that many lineups that you're using 38,000 in salary. They're just not going to build you that 35,000 in salary lineups. They're not going to do that. So I actually think this is a good chance to solo ship something in a big event.
For sure. For sure. Which yet again, like, it all goes back to like that, like, the lines that I'm talking about, because that's going to be a good portion of like the cash line or the, good portion of like the 1x, or not the 1x, like the 1.5, like 1.7, 2x return in most contests is going to be like that safe, projected lineups. And then everything else on both sides of that are just going to be like wild. Like I would absolutely expect someone to solo ship this one. We just have no clue who that, the combination of players that's going to be.
Yep, absolutely. Totally agree. I'm going to throw out real quickly the quick take on the game. I don't want to have a take on this game. Look, it's Sean Payton going back and, Rattler, obviously both rookie quarterbacks, but Bo Nix obviously has a little more experience. So I think that the only thing I'm looking at here is that the Saints are at home. They're 2-point dogs. I think I would just take the Saints and plus what are they, plus 120? I think I would bet them outright and bet them to cover, but I don't have a strong take on it. You know what I mean? It's just a very wishy-washy. I don't really feel like either team should be favored kind of situation. I just feel like it should be just basically like a pick 'em. So I'm taking the Saints in that case. But by the way, there's going to be a lot about Juwan Johnson. I wanted to just take a quick look at his ownership because I saw earlier in the day he was looking a lot more. Maybe it won't be. Actually, he dropped quite a bit. Juwan Johnson versus Foster Moreau. The fact that no one's playing Foster Moreau in the flex, like we're 1 week removed, right, from Foster Moreau outscoring Juwan Johnson. That just feels like a little. Actually, you know what? Over the last 2 weeks, Foster Moreau's outscored Juwan Johnson. So the fact that you're getting less than 5% ownership on Moreau because the way everybody's trying to force their builds in, I would just try to be overweight those types of situations. Wait for multi-entryers. In terms of like building like a hand-built lineup, I can just say right now that one of the things that I like to do is, again, I wanted to force leave money on the table, but I like the Saints captain and I like the Broncos captain. I really think that there's a chance that this is one of those where both defenses could get their slate. I don't think it'll be completely unowned, but I don't think people are going to play both of them together because you kind of have to leave a lot of money on the table if you do that, unless you play Kamara at captain. So if you play them both in the flex with Kamara at captain, you're not being that different. But if you play one of them as captain with Kamara and the other one in the flex, it's just an interesting way to get different where I could see all of those paths getting there. And remember, there's a lot of ways to score points there's going to be sacks in this game. Both these guys are going to take a number of sacks in general. You're going to bet on defenses against them for the next coming weeks until Derek Carr gets back. Just because they're going to gamble, they're going to hold the ball too long. You're going to have turnover opportunities. That's there. And you've always got with the turnover opportunities always comes the potential for a defensive touchdown. So I actually could see the defenses at 16 or 17 points tonight potentially being the optimal way to go, which sounds weird because I rarely do that except for the very beginning of the season. But I like it for this one, especially it being a Thursday. And that's what he said. Like we're looking at the Saints, and everybody, we're into the Bub memes because he had the big week and all that, and he's technically the wide receiver one. But shouldn't we consider a little Foster Moreau? He's gotten plenty of attention the last couple weeks, or more attention, I guess. And they like to look for him near the goal line. So I think you want to try and take some shots with Foster Moreau as a get different play.
Like for me, if I'm looking, to play this, and I just do one line, but like if technically everybody's even on the Saints of like what their actual skill level is and everything, like for me, trying to build, like I think it would make a lot of sense to have like Tipton and Moreau in the lineup and not have Bud in it.
Right.
That's the type of builds that I would probably, be interested in leaning towards.
Absolutely. And one thing that's for sure tonight, I would be shocked if Sean Payton doesn't run some sort of a trick play or two. That was his thing in New Orleans. I do believe in that kind of stuff matters in football, and him going back there, I could see this happening. And I hear what D Pope is saying, that Denver's better than people think. I don't exactly know how to feel about that. This offense has been absolutely putrid. They've been disgustingly awful. So I can't really say that they're better than people think. But in all fairness, we're like we're 4 weeks removed from the Saints being talked about as the best team in football. So it all changes. And I know it's a very different Saints team right now, but I still think the Saints are I think both these teams, I don't know who has a better or worse than people think, but I think that they're both not great football teams that can be competitive against anybody in a given week and actually can probably beat a lot of really good teams when both are fully healthy. The Broncos obviously being the more healthy of the two teams today. What is it? I wonder what the field is. What are the people out there who are watching this? What are you guys thinking? Where are you guys standing with Vele? Because I'm just a little surprised that I haven't heard him talked about from a captain perspective. You can see I demanded that I had 40% of him in the flex. He's my second highest owned player in the flex. I think this is like a really smart idea to be just well over the field, and no one's playing a captain. Look, it's not a huge percentage, but I have him in 8% of my lineups as captain. Honestly, he's been the highest scoring player on average of all these guys, except for the quarterbacks and Kamara. Meanwhile, everybody wants to play Javonte Williams, who we're still waiting for him to actually do something. Like, he never does anything, and everybody always wants to play him. Anyway, just throwing these things out there. So those were just some other little takes. But I'm curious where everybody ends up on Vele, because I think Vele is like, it's gonna be a tough matchup for Sutton. And I think Vele is going to be in a great spot here. And obviously, Bo Nix already likes him. He's a rookie. They're high on him. And he's played well in the 2 games that he's played. So I think he's very interesting.
No, I'm with you. Because I'm not playing Sutton. If I had to not play anybody on the slate, I'm probably not playing Sutton. Williams would probably be the next one that I would be hesitant or more favorable to taking out of my lineups once I start, either fading people or being less on, just because I think Sutton's out of reach. I know salary doesn't matter here, but I don't see Sutton exploding the slate. I think Sutton's ceiling is honestly 16 points or whatever with how Denver's been playing.
Yeah, unless there's one weird big play where he's double teamed and the ball gets tipped around and he catches it, for
Yeah.
But I'm just saying, I just look at the raw things with. In the games the 2 games, and look, it's a small sample size. The 2 games that Vele's played. Let's see, he had 8 targets and 6 targets, and in those same games, Sutton had he had 12 and 2, 12 and 4. So you're talking about 2 less targets overall in the games where they both played. The price difference, which we don't care about, is massive, but we don't care about it. But why can't we just have Vele outscore Sutton? So that's another one of those 1v1s that I don't mind. Oh, you know what? Instead of playing Sutton, I'll just play Vele and leave that extra 6,800 on the table or whatever. Anyway, so yeah, it's a funky slate. It's not I thought you were going to say immediately to lock in Kamara as the captain. I really did, because but I realized that you do that more with NBA, right? It seems like you're much more a captain locker in NBA.
Well, because okay, so if we're talking Kamara, he seems like the obvious play, right? What is the straight up percentage that you think he works in the captain? Do you think it's over a third?
I think he ends up in 50. In 50 in the high buy-in, I think 35 to 40 in the smaller buy-ins.
Yeah. So if it's that, would it?
Really, you should be trying to find a way to fade him, right?
Just speaking from game theory or EV, wouldn't it be? Or speaking out loud, maybe I'm wrong, but wouldn't it be plus EV to not have him in the captain here?
For sure. I'm playing enough lineups where I'm not going to just fade him entirely, because I do think it's too likely. You don't see this type of gap even on projections. He's 11 points higher in the goal captain, so I guess it'd be 7.5 points higher than everybody else. It's a pretty large gap. And if it was basketball and we had okay, we're not going to be playing for the most part. Yeah, maybe occasionally you throw a Kyrie captain instead of Luka. But if Luka's playing and it's a must-win game, it's pretty much going to be a Luka captain lineup, right? You know what I mean? That's a little different, I guess, in this situation to me, because I do think there's variance. Also, one thing that happens in football, and I hate to say it, but people hate this when you bring up injury possibilities. It's so possible that he could twist an ankle and be out for a quarter. Yeah, there's a million things that could happen. They could get smoked and he ends up sort of getting faded out of the game because they're down by 30 or whatever. There's a lot of things that could happen that keep him from being there. And one of the other ones that, again, I'm not crazy about the play because he's just not getting. I thought he'd get more touches going back to New Orleans this year with Jamal Williams, and he just really hasn't had that situation. Because that was my initial thought, is maybe I can pivot and just play Jamal Williams, hope he gets 2 rushing touchdowns, and hope that we get Kamara with 10 fantasy points, which is totally possible. But I don't think the 2 touchdowns for Williams are nearly as likely, because they just haven't run him near the goal line like they did last year and years past. I thought they would this year without Taysom. When Taysom was out, hasn't really gone that way.
And for me with Kamara, I'd be worried that he scores 15 to 16 points, to where he works in the flex, but it hinders his captain upside. That would be in the ways. He's not even failing in that, he's still optimal in the flex, but speaking out loud of how he wouldn't work in the captain, though I think that outcome is actually very likely today. Because if you're Denver, right? you're like, hey, let's make him throw the ball. Like we'll just throw everything at Kamara and like remove him from the game. Like wouldn't that be the game plan and have these wide receiver fours like go up against your actual defense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I was looking at other types of things. Another type of build that I don't think people are going to do very much of, even in the flex, playing Javonte and McLaughlin together. Another thing I considered that I think makes some sense. Playing Juwan Johnson and Foster Moreau together, although I don't think you need to get that creative because Foster Moreau is literally getting no ownership. But when early in the day, I was like, oh, okay, it's a normal slate. He'll probably get like 20%. So we're looking at 5% projected ownership. I'm not really looking to need to get too crazy. The one who's really low owned also that I wanted to mention that I made sure I have at least 15% little Jordan Humphrey, which I'm not even sure that he dresses, but assuming that he does dress, I will play little Jordan Humphrey and just gamble with it. There was actually people playing him in the main slate literally a week ago because he was coming off of a bunch of number of targets. But that Vele came back and people didn't seem to notice that. And Vele has obviously been the more desirable one for them. Anyway, Kendra Miller officially active, by the way. Taysom Hill, Derek Carr officially inactive. We kind of expected both of those things, and it's not really going to make any difference to me whatsoever. So that's where I'm at. Wait, what just happened? Did somebody hit a home run? No, damn it. That was a replay. I was hoping it was Lane Thomas hitting a home run because he's the one guy. I've got all the guys who have done anything in this game, and I just needed that Lane Thomas home run. Sorry. All right. Anything else before we get out of here? I don't feel like there's a whole lot more I have to cover. We've talked endlessly about a number of players because there are so many wild cards in this slate. And you can see, I mean, this is just what I like to do sometimes in my script. I had the SaberSim build it. I did the ROI, but there were guys like little Jordan Humphrey, assuming that he does play, and Vele that I wanted to just be over the field on just because I thought they weren't getting enough respect here. Tipton's another one we mentioned that I didn't program it in, but I did build him in two of my higher buy-in stuff. And just like you mentioned earlier, just subbed out Meme and put him in there. So subbed out Bubba and put him right in there. Do you have any other thoughts on this one, Brandon, before we get out of here?
I'm trying to think out loud of the viability of Rattler or Nix in the captain. Like, what's the total of this game? Like 38 right now? 38 and a half or something?
Yeah, 37. I think it's 37 and a half. 37.
Yeah. And, it's like a 2-point spread. So, like, both quarterbacks are probably going to end up at, like, 14 to 16 points. And, Kamara's going to do whatever he does. If he's within that range, I think it's viable that he isn't the winning captain. But he's still viable. But I'm trying to think of like if like we're removing Sutton, or at least that's what we're kind of working off of. Like we're not playing Sutton. So like you have Tipton, Moreau, Bub in there. If those guys are spreading the ball out, like one dude isn't like the end all be all, they might all end up with like anywhere from like 7 to 11 points. So like what actual or like, what do you think is the percentage that like Rattler or like Nix is the captain, and mainly based on the fact of what you can build with that? Like again, you have your two captains. You'll have Kamara. You'll have whether you want Williams or not. Like you can have Williams, and then you can have two wide receivers from both teams on top of whatever we had already. Like I don't know. I feel like there's maybe not an iceberg, but like I feel like the tip of like all the projections tonight are like super condensed. Like there's a lot of lineups that are going to be scoring, or at least projected to score, similar way up top, and then like the bottom just falls out. Like I think there's going to be just a huge gap between like the top 50% of lines that are fighting to cash and the bottom 50 that are like, right, it could be like 35, 40, 50 points offside the cash line, and you could be at like at like 65th% in the contest. I don't even know if I'm making sense, but like that's how I look at this contest. Yeah, and I think it's interesting. We have obviously come to it from a different approach, but I hear what you're saying, and that makes sense to me. I think there's a good chance. My personal pick, if you're going to play one of the quarterbacks captain, I would play Rattler. For one, he's getting half the ownership, and two, I actually think they may end up needing him more. At least the running game is healthy for Denver, and they have Kamara's healthy, obviously for New Orleans, but they're going to let Rattler try to do some things today. So
I'm a little higher on the Rattler over Bo Nix. I mean, they're projected within 2 fantasy points of each other, and for him to get half the ownership, if I had to pick one, I would pick Rattler because he's going to be sub 10%. That just would be just based on ownership. It's a good game theory slate, I think, more than it is an actual football game. I don't think I'm going to watch a second of this football game unless I'm doing well at the very end, because I'm going to be into the Dodgers and what's really important. No, I'm just kidding. But they just overturned the call. Damn it. Anything? All right, so I think we're pretty much going to shut things out here. Brandon, anything else you want to say to the people before we leave?
What are you getting any kickers tonight? I'm personally not. I mean, they're going to be most likely underowned, but like $5,000 for the New Orleans kicker and 54 for Will. Like, I'm just not landing in that salary range for the most part today.
They're each in one of my hand builds. I like a slight bit better than Groupie, but I think they're very similar. And I'm basically with the field in the flex. I do think there's a chance that the kickers, 8 to 10 points might be plenty good enough. So I'm very, very good with the kickers. Sure. You could make an argument to go even higher on the kickers. I actually don't mind that. I found a bunch of speculative plays that I was happy to take my shots on instead. So I didn't go there. Brandon, we got All-Star DFS saying, please come in for NBA Showdown this year. We talked about it. We might do some Tuesday stuff, right? With the 2 gamers, we can talk about some Showdown and stuff.
Yeah. And I mean, I'll certainly probably do the 2 gamers, or if there's like big like showdowns and stuff. If anything, I like playing the smaller showdowns, like the showdown that starts at, I guess it'd be 6 or 7 Eastern, like whatever the smallest one is. When it's like a 12-game slate and you have like 3 showdowns, I actually prefer playing the 2 like early ones versus the big one.
Yeah, and you're not running into a lot of top pros in those either. So people don't like to do those on big slates as much. So it's nice to play a little bit more with casuals sometimes.
Yeah, or they're playing them, but they're not focusing on that because they got huge amounts in the main slate. They're just running whatever their numbers are for those smaller showdowns. But yeah, no, I certainly plan on being their all-star.
Nice. Well, it'll be fun. I'm looking forward to the NBA season, guys. I'm going to work on a couple things to get settled, but I think we're going to have a pretty cool thing coming up. I'm still practicing my SaberSim new, so we'll start running. I'll start using that screen because we're going to have to. Basically, in the next couple of weeks, we're gonna be shifting all over to the SaberSim new, and every time they do this, it always makes improvements. It just takes a little bit of a learning curve. I would encourage anybody who's new to SaberSim or new to TrueDFS, they take a look at those videos that Jordan made in the SaberSim school that is on the new SaberSim. And I also would recommend when Brandon releases his to check that one out, and when Goldie releases his to check that one out, as well as Sheets and all that. And we are putting, just to give everybody a heads up, we are putting more stuff behind the paywall now. Sheets is doing more videos that are, process and stuff like that for just the customers, for just the subscribers. So another extra incentive to come join us. And as people have asked me in the last few things that I've done, yes, we will come up with some NBA promo, which will probably be done in the next day. We'll probably have to figure it out tomorrow morning. I will alert you guys what that is, but it'll probably be the last promo we do for a good 6 months. So might want to get in and join us soon after that. So that's all I got for today. All right, Brandon, you ready to take off?
Yeah, I do believe I am. I think, after debating stuff, I will probably run Kamara in my lineup tonight.
Single entry, right?
Yeah.
I think it makes sense for single
entry.
entry.
I don't know. At least in a slate like this, I like it is probably plus EV to not have him there, but I just don't feel like purposely burning money like that, guesstimating on who would be that captain, who beats him.
Maybe still try to leave 4,000 or so on the table, and at least they could differentiate a little bit that way. Yeah. All right. Well, Brandon, always great to do these with you. Really, really enjoy it every week. Looking forward to next week already. We will have me and Sheets did an early look for Sunday's main slate, so look out for that. We will be live at 11 a.m. Eastern. I will have all my stuff this time of year of the NFL when everybody's getting hurt. I'm not going to start up. I used to do early. Here's my exposures. Here's this. I'll put all my exposures out that I've got where they're at Saturday, because that's the only thing fair. Because there's so much injury news. We don't even know who some of these guys are traded, whether they're playing or not. There's a lot of stuff going on in the NFL. So we'll look out for that. And thanks as always for being with us, guys. Anybody has any questions or thoughts, we'll be in the Discord, and give us a like on the way out. And let's see some